On this episode of ResiWeek, Control4 announces Smart Home OS 3, and Crestron announces a partnership with Domotz. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 173. Click to accept.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Peerless AV, driving technology through innovation.
And by Access Networks.
Welcome to ResiWeek. This is your weekly wrap-up of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And today I'm pleased to be joined by Brad Heinz. He is the Senior Director of Product Marketing for Control4. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great, Matt.
Thank you so much for being here. Then we have John Clancy. He is the VP of Residential for Crestron. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great. And last but not least, we have one of my longest standing friends, Richard Fergosa. He is the principal and founder of Fergosa Design. How you doing, bud?
Fellow West Coast greetings. I'm just so honored to be wedged between two titans as I
right
now. It's like, they can't necessarily see my foursquare going on, but I'm like just the grandness that surrounds me. It's a wonderful way to come out of a holiday.
Wait, did I somehow get included into that?
No.
Okay, perfect.
Just around me.
Got it. I thought so. I got confused for a moment. All right, gentlemen, let's kick this off. This comes to us from AVNation.tv. If you were under a rock last week, Control4 announced OS 3 and completely reimagined smart living. It is a new platform that is going to allow essentially every connected device in the house to hopefully connect to it and give you a vast variety of features, somewhere in the neighborhood of, if I remember this correctly, over 1,000 new features. So, Brad, let's start with you on this, obviously. One, I'd like you to give us a quick, elevator pitch on what's great and incredibly exciting about Smart Home OS 3. But one of the questions specifically that I had was, what caused the designers to really go down this incredibly streamlined look that's, really less command central, which is what we've come to expect for so long from the app-based side of Control, into this more user-centric, cutting-edge design situation and feel?
That's a good question. I think there's two aspects to that. The first is, in the early days of smart home, there were still a lot of family members that were tech adverse and didn't really, understand how to interact with things super intuitively. So you needed that command central type of an approach to make it approachable for everyone in the family. But over the last 10 years and the way we've all embraced smartphones, everyone in the family now is very adept at a lot of these common interactions that we do on our touchscreen based mobile devices. And so we wanted to leverage that experience and understanding and bring that into the home and in the way that you interact with it. That was one. The second is that as everything becomes more complex, more connected, it brings in a lot more complexity. And so we wanted to provide homeowners with more flexibility to be able to get to their favorite devices, or to see only the lights that are on, or the shades that are open, or the doors that are unlocked. And so OS 3 really elevates all of those favorite devices and removes a lot of that complexity, because in a Control4 home, on average, they have 40 connected devices. And, again, in the early days when you had 2 or 3 or 4, clicking around was okay and that was acceptable. But now when you get into 40 up to 100, over 1,000, you need a user interface that's very flexible, hides all of the complexity, gives you the favorite stuff, and then the ability to drill down further if you want it. And so those were two of the major goals with Smart Home OS 3.
Very good. All right, John, let's come to you next on this. Something that really hit me with the release of Smart Home OS 3, as well as the release of Crestron Home that was announced back at ISE, is that both companies and really everyone who offers app-based control is really going down this path of allowing the end user to personalize their experience, to personalize their app and have a level of control, which again, we really have not seen that in app-based control in the past. Where is the delta between giving the end user enough control that they feel that they can personalize things and giving them too much to where they can really make it even harder to operate? Where's that break point?
And I think that's a great question, because there is a fine balance there, right? You don't want the end user to become programmers, right? Or give them that ability or put that onus back on them. But in this day and age, the average end user expects some ability to be able to customize and personalize their systems, right? And again, our focus over the past couple of years is really about simplifying deployment of, what was traditionally known as a complex system. Crestron was always looked at this very complex thing to deploy. So simplifying that, but also, providing some end user customization and personalization, especially in this room-centric feel, where I get to see everything in my space, my immediate space around me. And as Brad pointed out, the hundreds, if not thousands, of connected devices in some of these homes, making that really easy to operate and to just to interact with in general.
Very good. Rich, speaking of complex systems, when you follow the changes that are happening within the industry, right? Smart Home OS, very user-centric, very, I don't want to say easy to program, but it's something that everyone is continually trying to make this process significantly easier. What does this do, if anything, to that, that knowledge base and that technical skill that you yourself as a advanced programmer have? Does this diminish the ability to code and what happens from the type of projects that you traditionally work on, whereas now a lot of that could be achieved fairly easily with Smart Home OS 3 or Crestron's Home OS? Where does that, how does that fit into the industry?
Well, I think, the first thought that everybody always had when an announcement like this is made is that immediately the emperor has no clothes, right? It's now going to completely change and revolutionize things. And for me, it's a matter of just establishing some perspective. I'm going to point out John and myself. We both have had careers as integrators, and between the two of us, probably close to about 50 years of combined experience as integrators. And when we first started out with control systems, there were two at the time. And they were almost exclusively for bespoke systems. So you had all of the features, and ironically enough, what we're seeing, although we're packaging it in different ways, is not new. What has changed and what I'm excited about and the perspective that this brings is it's accessible. And that's a huge difference at this point. We're able to deploy, if you will, are able to deploy solutions that 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a price point and a price of entry that you needed to work your way into. Now, and I've always said, what's been the key to this? And over and over, mobile, right? Everybody has a computer in their pocket now. And that has shifted how we react as an industry. Now, that's the great news. The great news is that you now have a much wider audience who can get excited about this, who has the tools available to them. And they can get excited, and it's always going to fill that niche, and we're happy for that. It's like anything else. Just because an Apple Watch came out doesn't mean that Piaget went out of business. They're not necessarily correlations with one another. Bespoke is always going to have a different requirement, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, whether it's government operations center. But the best part now is that we can work with them in tandem. So you have the ability to deploy more systems out there. You have the ability to have different staff push those systems out, or the end user even, and enjoy their systems and use it for what we've always said, which is that 90% of the system, right? We had called it for years, our principles of automation. In terms of an automated home, you had about 6 or 8 things that you were really concerned about, right? You wanted it warmer or cooler, lighter or dimmer, louder or softer, on or off. And so these systems are echoing those principles that we've always had from the beginning. We're just allowing the users now to be able to take control of it, to modify it, sometimes get themselves in trouble with it, because again, you're giving them a toy and you're handing them the keys, and it's not quite handing them an espresso and a puppy to a 2-year-old, but it's pretty darn close sometimes. I think that there is always that coexistence going to occur. And I think it's great for companies to be able to adapt, because it's another tool. You can spend your time in those 2 or 3 projects a year that are your crowning jewels. But at the same time, you can crank out 50, 60, 100, 150 of these projects and have happy clients and maintain your business model and grow your business and continue to flourish. So for me, it's always been, I embrace it. I view it as an exciting time because it allows me to offer options to clients or to integrators that I'm working with to say, look, consider this. You're going to keep them happy, and it's just going to allow you to maintain your profitability and grow your business as you decide to step up, if you decide to go into that market. And if you don't, it's still a great living for an integrator.
Very good. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our next story of the day. This comes to us from our Residential Systems and a new Crestron partnership with Domotz. Essentially, Crestron has announced a new strategic partnership with Domotz that will allow a seamless integration between the Domotz suite of products with Crestron smart home systems that empower integrators to remotely monitor their customers' systems. John, we're going to start with you on this. Again, you can probably sense the trend here as we're starting with the people from said company. John, the main question I had for you on this was, remote is obviously becoming such a huge aspect of so many integrators' businesses. What drove Crestron to partner with Domotz opposed to just developing your own?
So look, that really comes down to a few things. We've had mycrestron.com in place for a while, and it does a really good job at backing up your Crestron home system. So every iteration of changes gets stored in the cloud, and it's a great resource even for notifications if a processor or a Crestron device falls offline. What the Domotz partnership allows is this higher level of interaction between third-party devices, right? So devices like power controllers and PoE switches and things like that that allow the dealer to more proactively support not just our products, but all of the products that they're installing in the home, as well as tie those into a quick abilities to be able to reset and restore functionality for certain devices via the interaction of these power controllers or PoE switch ports.
Very good. Richard, when you follow this, when you follow the proliferation of remote monitoring, remote access, something that I feel gets overlooked more often than not is how an integrator essentially verifies their legalities and covers their liability when they start putting remote access in and control that they obviously have remote access to. How do integrators go about creating either a policy or a system so that it's not just the client signing off on essentially a bill of materials, but that they truly understand what they're giving their integrators?
Well, I think you've got a difference that you kind of have to draw a line between residential and all else. When you're dealing with commercial, when you're dealing with government, when you're dealing with education, you have far different security policies that you're dealing with. Just strictly in basic commercial, you've got financial responsibilities, you've got SEC responsibilities, you have HIPAA when you're dealing with medical. So I'm going to set those aside for the time being, because that tends to be a policy that is required by the whichever organization you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to residential, there does need to be a bit more education about the process. I will raise my hand saying that every time I get an agreement from, some kind of software update, I just blindly click accept, right? How many of us go through the 15-page, scrolling document that you have to scroll to get to the bottom before you hit accept? Click to accept is the hardest thing to deal with when dealing with end users and security and privacy. And, GAFA has issues with this. I mean, we're seeing stories every other day about how do we deal with privacy in this connected world. And this is something that integrators do have to spend some time with. We have not had it happen yet, but there will be a time where there will be a security gap or a privacy gap or a privacy leak that will cause some issues and some backlash in the industry. And you just hope that you're not one of the people that's caught in that wave coming through. It comes to education. It comes to orienting your client. I mean, the same way that you counsel them between control system A or B or television Y or Z, it does require, and it should be your responsibility, which is why they're going to you in the first place as their advocate to say, here are the pros and cons. Here's what we'd like to do. Here are the gray areas in between. And it's my job to guide you through this process to make an educated decision. And then you can go from yay or nay. Now, depending on how that data is used, different companies use it different ways. Some of them will store that information locally. It never leaves the site. Some of them are cloud-based. We see less and less of that because there are ways to maintain privacy in between. However, when it comes to these systems, and I know Brad was saying, I mean, you're getting to 40, 50, 100, 150 connected devices. You need to know what's going on there. And systems at this point are intelligent enough to be proactive in terms of identifying, diagnosing, and sometimes being self-healing when possible. And so, from the trade-off standpoint, there is the difference of saying, hey, look, we are going to get updates from your unit, but no, it's not going to tell us whether, you're out of diapers. What it is going to tell us is if you are having a unit that's about to fail or a system's overheating, or based upon the continued use, we're seeing some warning flags that this is occurring. And that's the beauty of these systems that are out there. Whether it is a Hiji that was acquired and was part of, the Snap world, or whether Domotz in this partnership that's here, whether it's Backpack. I mean, any of these, I'm a huge fan of it because information is critical to all of this. And especially as an integrator, it's our responsibility to be able to say, we want this system to take care of itself. You should be able to take it for granted as much as you do a light switch. Nobody questions a light switch when you flip the switch. We want to get our technology to that point where it does become ubiquitous, where they're not thinking about it or worrying that, they're going to break the system if they're left to their own devices. So, again, big fan of it. I use it. Typically I wind up, putting them all together because I know if I get two indicators from two separate services, I know I've got an issue as opposed to a false flag.
Very good. Brad, this is something that, from the remote access side of things, this is something that, Control4's offered for a while. There's been a lot of vendors that have been down this route. What is it about remote access that gives integrators so much freedom and so much really, I don't want to say just the caveat of being able to walk in and say, hey, we can fix these problems before you see it. This is something that, as I said, Control4's had for years in this type of thing. How do you promote dealers to really take full advantage of these remote monitoring tools?
Well, our approach was to remove subscription licensing, right? Because the challenge with charging for a service like this is who should bear the cost. How do you pass that along directly to a consumer? And that was, directly after we acquired Package a little over 2 years ago, and we gave our dealer channel Backpack, we removed that licensing. Package tried for a while and they failed, and Hiji tried and they failed to monetize those services. And so that was one of the things, we just baked it right into almost all of our networking gear. And I think that there's a lot of really great things to come from that. So one, remove that complexity of the licensing. And then the other thing is, we know that truck rolls will always be expensive. And that is something that we're focused on. We know that our consumers, our homeowners, they want professional help, but they also want to, they don't want to pay $150 just to have somebody come in and reset a device. And so we continue to do product development around that idea, that central focus, to reduce truck rolls by giving our dealers these tools. And by letting them experience it, the first time they save a truck roll, they're totally hooked on being able to use those things. The other thing that is important, as Rich mentioned, is the privacy aspect. And for a long time, we've given our homeowners the ability to switch their dealer of record, remove their access, and make it so that they have complete control over who can connect into their home to control their devices. And they can do it in a moment, or they can do it after having a discussion with their dealers. And, with OS3, we've continued to give our dealers new remote access tools. Composer Pro, it is the fastest deployment for OS3 today, and it has all of those remote management capabilities built right in. And so whether it's the networking layer or the home automation layer, those remote access tools are really important for integrators.
Excellent. All right, gentlemen, we're going to leave it there due to timing. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being here. Brad, thanks again for stopping by. Always appreciate your time. If people want to find out more about Control4 and, more importantly, the new OS3 debut, where can they find that?
Control4.com with the number 4, or on Twitter at Control4. You can also find me on Twitter at Brad Hinze, BradHintze, as well. Excellent. And is that released today or tomorrow? It is. Well, we actually released it last week, and we have well over 1,000 homes that have OS3 installed in it. We were talking about it this morning. Excellent. So that's something that's really exciting. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. John, thanks again for joining us today. If people want to connect with you or learn more about Crestron, where can they do that?
jclancy at Crestron.com and Crestron.com/Crestron Home.
Excellent. Thank you. Rich, my good friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Fregosa Design, where can they do that?
Well, one place you can find me is on Twitter at @rfregosa. You can also go to the website, fregosadesign.com. But honestly, most importantly, please come to avnation.tv. You can find me here on ResiWeek. You can also find me on our one of our sister shows with my good friend Steve Greenblatt, State of Control, where we talk about automation system programming.
Excellent. All right, gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. For myself, if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter and pretty much every other social platform. But more importantly, as Richie said, please stop by avnation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of our other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you support them as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.